Going from Africa to Madagascar meant we sort of skipped over the Comoros Islands, an archipelago divided between an actual Comoros country and France. Let's find out why. The Comoros form a chain of volcanic islands at the northern edge of the Mozambique Channel. Beginning about 8 million years ago, a plume of magma broke through the sea floor and created volcanoes, steadily growing until they broke through the water. All the while, the tectonic plate is moving relative to the plume, the hotspot, creating a chain. The easternmost island of Mayotte is the oldest, followed by Anjouan, then Moali, and finally Grand Comore, the youngest with a still active volcano, Mount Carthala, which had its latest major eruption in 2005. Once a volcanic island stops erupting, it will cool and subside, sinking back into the sea. Mayotte, as the oldest, shows the clearest sign of this, actually becoming two islands, Grande Terre and Petite Terre, with an extensive reef around it. One day the island will disappear, and the reef breach the surface as an atoll, before it and the rest of the Comoros sink beneath the waves whence they came. The Comoros are affected by the monsoons. We know the pattern by now. Wet season, November to April, dry, May to October. Being in the tropics, the Comoros are warm year-round, but the sea keeps them from becoming too hot. Further inland, in the mountains, the climate is cooler. The islands are naturally covered in tropical forest, and being on islands, possess a lot of endemic species found only here. Like Madagascar, the Comoros remained uninhabited long after humans spread across the continents. Because of their location, the Comoros are natural stepping stones between Africa and Madagascar, and the first inhabitants appear to have been the Proto-Malagasy Ntaulwo of Madagascar sometime towards the end of the first millennium. Very soon, however, these first Comorians are joined by Bantu, Arabs, Persians, and even Indians. They all become part of the cultural fusion in East Africa, the Swahili. The new Comorians emerge predominantly as Bantu folk, speaking a Bantu language related to Swahili. Their name, however, comes from the Arabic for the local name, the Islands of the Moon, Gamar. Like their cousins in Africa, the Comoros begin trading in slaves, but their most important economic role is as stopover ports for the voyages across the Indian Ocean. So it makes total sense that the Portuguese, on their way to India, would pass through in 1505. The decline of the Swahili sultanates in the 15th century set the stage beautifully for Portuguese takeover in the 16th, but the Comoros seem to have escaped their grasp. A number of Swahili clans relocated to the islands, probably due to this disruption, and consolidated themselves as their ruling elite. Maore was one of these new sultanates, founded by Hassan I. The name might be related to Arabic maut, death. Navigating Mayotte can be perilous if you don't know how to avoid the reefs. The Portuguese repeated this as Mayotte, French Mayotte. Next is Nzwani, which I could not find the origin of, but was rendered in French as Anjouan. Its Sultan Muhammad I also ruled the island of Moali. This is the Swahili word for fire, or light. It may or may not be related. In French, this becomes Moeli. The largest island of Ngazija gets its name from ancient Bantu for bee. Maybe beekeeping was an important local industry. Rather than Frenchify the name, it's known as Grand Comore, the Big Comoro. Unlike the other islands, Ngazija becomes divided into 11 sultanates, all vying for control. Mitsamihuli, Mbude, Mbwanku, Hamehami, Itsandra, Washili, Bambao, Demani, Domba, Hambu, and Bajini, with Bambao often being hegemon over the others. As Europeans increasingly dominated trade across the Indian Ocean, the Comoros became an important supply point for their voyages. However, this stopped short of actual colonization. What islands Europeans did occupy were uninhabited, like the Mascarenes, and the bulk of their resources and attention focused on the Indies, leaving the Comorians to continue their wars amongst one another. Things began to change after the Napoleonic Wars. France had been booted from India in the 7 Years' War and lost Mauritius to Britain in 1814, leaving their only outpost in the Indian Ocean, Île Bourbon, the future Réunion. The island's harbor was unsuited for a naval base, and France looked for other alternatives. Madagascar was one, and the Comoros were another. Britain sunk their claws into the most powerful sultanate, Mzwani in particular, offering aid like money and guns for favorable deals. The proverbial boat was soon rocked by the upheavals of Imerna in Madagascar, and exiled Merina Prince Ramanateka conquered Mwali in 1830, becoming Sultan Abderrahmani. Another Malagasy expatriate followed, deposed King of Boina Andrian Soli. He took advantage of succession troubles in Mzwani and conquered Maori in 1832. Abdallah II retook the throne of Mzwani and retook Maori in 1835. This situation remained chaotic, though, and Andrian Soli sold the island to France in 1841, who, the previous year, had acquired a base in Nosy Bay off the coast of Madagascar. The French purchase of Mayotte ended Mzwani's designs on the island. With a better harbor at Dzaoudzi on Petite Terre than either Ile Bourbon or Nosy Bay, Mayotte became the French base of operations in the Indian Ocean. In 1848, France abolishes slavery, including in their new colony, but work conditions remained harsh when the French established a sugar plantation economy. Our ever-looming friend, the scramble for Africa, came for the Comoros too, and France secured them for its sphere. It already had one island, may as well collect them all. And with the arrival of both Germans and British along the east coast of Africa, not a moment too soon. Now claiming the whole archipelago, France expands their colony to Mayotte and dependencies, Mayotte et dépendance. 1886, Moali becomes a French protectorate. Anjouan also becomes a French protectorate, and Sultan Abdallah III is granted France's blessing to conquer Grande Comore. 1895, the Glorioso Islands are attached to Mayotte, tiny, uninhabited atolls to the northeast. French protectorate was always only ever a prelude to annexation, and this happens to Moali in 1909, followed by Anjouan in 1912. Their rulers are pensioned off and exiled. Not long after, Mayotte and dependencies are attached to the colony of Madagascar, becoming one of its dependencies. The sugar industry failed in the Comoros, so the French diversified with chocolate, vanilla, and spice plantations. They also grew ylang ylang, which is used in perfume. The Comoros actually become the world's largest producer of it, but this comes at a terrible cost. French rule becomes exploitative, and profits from plantations do not go to developing local infrastructure. Meanwhile, the French leave the Swahili elite in charge as landowners and officials. French attention focuses on Madagascar, and the poor Comoros fall between the cracks. Many Comorians migrate to Madagascar, much to the consternation of the Malagasy. After World War II, the Comoros were detached from Madagascar as a separate territory, le territoire des Comores, and the promise of full citizenship was fulfilled. But these didn't help matters. After the fall of the Fourth French Republic in 1958, France allowed its territories to decide how they wanted to move forward. Despite their neglect, the Comoros wished to remain an overseas territory. Maybe they saw it as the best option. Meanwhile, the capital was moved to Moroni on Grande Comore. 1961, after the rest of France's African empire had declared independence, the Comoros were granted self-government. Things must have changed, and Comorians increasingly grew apart from their French countrymen by the 1970s. Decolonization was still a goal of both the US and the USSR, and France agreed in 1973 to grant independence to the Comoros in 1978. After all, the particulars had been handled. A 1974 referendum, however, revealed that the people of Mayotte, the Maorais, did not want independence. They were a minority in the islands and feared independence would mean domination by Grande Comore and Anjouan. A compromise was offered to give Mayotte autonomy in a new Comorian republic, but Ahmad Abdallah of the independence movement would accept no such compromise. Frustration with French interference in what he considered an internal Comorian affair, and worried that this represented European aims to divide and weaken his country, Abdallah unilaterally declared independence in 1975. The new state of the Comoros adopted Arabic and Comorian as official languages to reassert its heritage, and was soon accepted by the United Nations. Mayotte remained with France, and the Glorioso Islands were reassigned to France's territory of the scattered islands of the Indian Ocean. Abdallah didn't give up Mayotte, but was president for only a month before he was overthrown. President Said Mohammed Jaffer adopted a more conciliatory approach. 1976, Mayotte reaffirmed its allegiance to France, and the next year the capital was moved from Dzaoudzi to Mamoudzou on Grande Terre. The UN actually came on the side of the Comoros, but a Security Council vote was vetoed by France, which of course is a permanent member. Their resolutions are non-binding anyway. Jaffer was soon replaced by Ali Soili, who began his own cultural revolution with a mixture of Islam and revolutionary socialism. After antagonizing the French and conservative Comorians, the French government commissioned a mercenary, Bob Denard, who had helped overthrow Abdallah, to do the same to Soili. With Soili's death in 1978, the Comoros became a federal Islamic republic, the three remaining islands' constituents. Abdullah was brought back as president, but Denard was the real power in the country, receiving support from France and also apartheid South Africa and Rhodesia. The Comoros then devolved into the plaything of Denard's mercenaries. Besides typical abuses of occupying soldiers, the economy was entirely focused on plantation exports, foregoing the production of food, which proved utterly disastrous when the value of the island's exports fell. By the 80s, Rhodesia was gone, and both France and South Africa thought better of supporting a mercenary state. Abdullah's attempts to oust them resulted in his death in 1989, but Denard was soon forced to leave the islands. He came back in 1995 for a fourth coup, but French intervention finally captured Denard and ended his reign once and for all. This didn't improve the situation, though, because in 1997, both Anjouan and Moali declared independence. Another coup in 1999 put Azali Assoumani in power. He enacted a new constitution in 2001, creating the Union of the Comoros, Union des Comores, Jamhuriyat al-Comor al-Muttahida, Udzima wa Comori, where each president of the islands would take turns being president of the Comoros. Anjouan and Moali agreed and rejoined in 2002. Sadly, the Comoros don't seem to have gotten any better. Politics are still messy and sometimes violent, and still President Assoumani is steadily consolidating power. The Comoros are among the poorest places in the world, and most people get by with fishing and subsistence agriculture. Pushed from the coast by plantations, Comorians have taken up to farming the infertile highlands, causing extensive environmental degradation. The Comoros continue to claim Mayotte and the Glorioso Islands, which the rest of the world firmly accepts as French. Mayotte, meanwhile, has enjoyed much more political and economic stability. In 2003, Mayotte graduated first to an overseas collectivity, then to a fully integrated overseas department of France in 2011. Mayotte may be poorer and more agrarian compared to the rest of France, but this one island's economy is larger than that of the three islands of the Comoros, its citizens enjoying a much higher standard of living. This has caused migration from the Comoros, leading to protests by the Maorais. Now, I know the principle of self-determination is an important part of modern statehood, and the Comorians were well within their right to secede from France. But with the benefit of hindsight, looking at Mayotte, they might have done better remaining with France. Anyway, we still got a few nations to cover in the Indian Ocean before we return to Africa. Next up is France's other department, La Réunion. See you next time.